I'm not suggesting Queen Camilla lacks authority.
The palace did not whisper this time. It confirmed. Catherine had been granted access to Queen Mary's diamond vault, and Camilla was ordered to surrender the keys. In one stunning decision, the monarchy redrew its private lines of trust. What looked like a ceremonial transfer became something far more personal, because behind those locked doors sat not only jewels, but power, memory, and judgment. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine sat in a quiet palace room when the sealed instruction was placed before her. For several seconds, she did not touch it. Her hands stayed still, her face controlled, but William could see the shock move through her before she spoke a single word. Queen Mary's diamond vault, a private royal store of historic jewels connected to family rank, royal trust, and the crown's oldest symbols, had never been treated like an ordinary collection. Access meant confidence. Control meant legitimacy, and now that confidence had been moved away from Camilla and placed firmly with Catherine, William watched the future queen lower her eyes to the order, and the silence around her felt heavier than ceremony. The document did not ask for patience. It did not suggest a trial period. It confirmed a formal transfer of control, and beneath that single decision sat a message no one in the room could mistake. Catherine was not being lent the vault. She was being trusted with it. The prince understood why that mattered, because royal continuity, the planned passing of duty, symbols, and authority from one generation to the next, depends on more than bloodlines. It depends on who is believed capable of protecting the meaning behind the crown. Catherine finally touched the paper. Her voice stayed low, but the question cut through the room. Does Camilla know? No one answered quickly. That pause told her more than any explanation could. Somewhere else inside the palace, the queen consort was about to hear that the keys she had held, guarded, and believed secure were no longer hers to command. Camilla received the news from a senior aide who had clearly rehearsed every word. The aide stood carefully, choosing a tone that would not sound cruel, but the phrase still landed with force. Surrender the keys. Camilla's expression tightened. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The humiliation was already there, sharp and public even behind a private door. To her, this was not administration. This was removal. Charles's approval made the order impossible to soften. His name on the sealed instruction turned palace talk into palace action, and even those loyal to Camilla understood the king had crossed a line he could not uncross. Charles had not simply allowed Catherine in. He had closed a door behind the woman beside him, and as the first key was prepared for return, one question began moving through the palace with dangerous speed. Why had Camilla been removed so abruptly? But before anyone could understand the meaning of the keys, the palace had to face the people standing closest to the vault, and the wounds each of them carried into the room. Every royal crisis has its symbols, but this one had faces. Catherine, steady but shaken. Camilla, wounded but defiant. William, silent with controlled anger. Charles, the caught between duty and the woman beside him. The diamonds were locked away, but the emotions were exposed. By the time the palace corridors went quiet, everyone understood that this was not only about jewels, it was about belonging. Catherine remained near the table after the order was read, and William studied her face with the focus of someone trying to measure the damage before anyone else saw it. The future queen, the wife of the heir who would one day stand beside the throne, had spent years proving that duty could be quiet, steady, and human. Now that same quiet strength had pulled her into a deeper circle of royal confidence. Queen Mary's diamond vault, a secured collection of historic jewels tied to royal rank and family legacy, had become the place where Catherine's public loyalty turned into private trust. William saw the flicker in her eyes before she could hide it. It was not fear of Camilla. It was fear of the storm this decision would release. Catherine knew elevation inside the palace never came without a cost, and this cost had a name. Camilla would not see the order as careful planning. She would see it as judgment. The prince understood that instantly, because he had watched small tensions grow into sharp silences, and now those silences had been written into an official instruction. Charles sat apart from the others, visibly tired in a way no crown could disguise. The king understood what the order would look like, no matter how gently his staff explained it. The queen consort had believed her years beside him had secured her place near the monarchy's deepest symbols. Camilla had endured public doubt, family distance, and years of proving herself. Yet in one quiet administrative move, she had been pushed away from a vault she believed reflected acceptance. A palace aide moved before anyone spoke again. The aide opened the internal access list, a private record showing who could enter restricted royal spaces, and removed Camilla's authorization before the public confirmation was even prepared. The action was small. The meaning was brutal. Catherine did not celebrate it. William did not smile. Charles simply looked down, as though the sound of a name being removed had become louder than any argument. William finally asked the question no one wanted to answer. Has every duplicate key been returned? The room went still. Catherine turned toward him. Charles closed his hand slowly against the arm of his chair. Somewhere beyond that room, Camilla was about to realize that Catherine had not merely been elevated, she had been trusted in a way the queen consort no longer was. And that trust did not appear overnight, because one earlier moment had already pushed the palace to the edge of this decision. The palace would later pretend the vault decision came from careful planning, but those inside remembered the real trigger. It happened during a private jewel review before the Commonwealth reception, when a diamond riviere linked to Queen Mary was requested for Camilla and quietly refused for Catherine. One small exchange became the point of no return, because everyone in the room saw what had just been exposed. Catherine had been prepared for the evening with quiet care, not vanity. The Commonwealth reception, a formal gathering where the royal family hosts representatives from nations connected through shared history with the crown, mattered because it placed the future queen before the world as a symbol of steadiness. The diamond riviere, a necklace made of diamonds arranged in a flowing line, mattered even more because Queen Mary's jewels carried the weight of old monarchy. Catherine was not asking for decoration. She was being positioned to carry meaning. Camilla understood that meaning before anyone explained it. The queen consort had watched Catherine's rise with a smile that never fully reached her eyes, and when the request for the diamond riviere reached her office, the answer did not return quickly. It slowed, it stalled, then it changed. A palace dresser was told the piece should remain unavailable, and another jewel would be chosen instead. Catherine said nothing in front of the staff, but her silence had edges. William found her later, standing alone after the briefing had ended. The prince knew that look. Catherine was not angry in the easy way people expected. She was hurt, and that made it worse. She told him the delay felt personal, then stopped herself before saying more. William did not push her. He only listened, because he understood that palace pain often arrives dressed as procedure, and this time procedure had cut straight into his wife's place in the future. Camilla made the tension unmistakable when she insisted the jewel should remain with the current queen. The words sounded simple, but the room heard the challenge beneath them. The queen consort was not only defending a necklace, she was defending rank, presence, and the fragile belief that years beside Charles had earned her final authority over the symbols nearest to the throne. Camilla believed she was protecting her position. Instead, she exposed how far she was willing to go to keep Catherine behind a closed door. A junior courtier noticed the first crack in the story. The inventory file, the official list recording royal jewels and their approved use, had been marked twice. One note favored Camilla. Another correction came from Charles's private office, making clear that Queen Mary's collection was not personal territory to be controlled by preference. The courtier did not speak, but the courtier understood the danger immediately. 2 marks on one file meant 2 centers of power were fighting over one future. Charles had not wanted the matter to become a battle, yet the king's correction proved he already knew one had begun. William began asking quiet questions after that day, and every answer led him closer to the same fear. Someone had been blocking Catherine's access long before the keys were ordered back. The answer would not come through paperwork first. It would come through a confrontation that stripped away every polite palace disguise. The confrontation did not happen in public. It happened behind a closed door, where titles could not soften the truth. Camilla entered believing she could negotiate. Catherine entered believing silence had cost her enough. William stood beside her, not as an ornament of succession, but as a husband who had watched the insult land. Then the keys were placed on the table, and the room changed forever. Camilla looked at the keys before she looked at Catherine. The queen consort understood what that small sound meant when metal touched wood. A private meeting, in palace terms, is not casual. It is a controlled conversation, held away from staff and cameras, so the family can settle matters before they become public wounds. This one mattered because the vault transfer had already been confirmed, And everyone inside that room knew the meeting was not truly about asking. It was about surrender. Catherine kept her voice steady, but William knew what that steadiness had cost her. She did not begin with accusation. She began with duty. Queen Mary's diamond vault, she said, belonged to the crown's memory, not to any private rivalry. The crown, in plain terms, means the monarchy as an institution beyond one person, one marriage, or one wounded pride. Catherine understood that distinction. Camilla heard it as a warning. The future queen was not asking to be welcomed anymore. She was standing where the king's instruction had placed her. Camilla pushed back with the force of someone who felt cornered by politeness. She said she had stood beside Charles through years of judgment, years of cold rooms, years when even acceptance felt conditional. The queen consort insisted she should not be treated like an outsider in her own household. Her words carried pain, but they also carried possession. Catherine did not flinch. She answered that the issue was not rank, not marriage, not public sympathy. It was conduct. It was trust. It was whether the monarchy's most sacred symbols could be protected without being used as weapons. William finally stepped forward, and the air seemed to tighten around him. The prince revealed, through a documented internal access chain shown to the room, that several requests connected to Catherine had been stalled without clear explanation. He did not shout. He did not need to. The record spoke for him. The internal access chain, a tracked sequence of approvals showing who handled each request, mattered because it proved the delays were not imaginary. And Catherine had not simply misunderstood palace caution. Camilla's face changed when William mentioned the chain. The queen consort realized he had seen more than a single refusal. He had seen patterns. He had seen names, dates, and silent blocks dressed up as procedure. For the first time, Catherine saw the confidence leave Camilla's eyes, replaced by something colder and more dangerous: calculation. Camilla reached for the keys slowly. She placed them on the table without a word. Catherine did not touch them at once. William watched both women, understanding that the surrender was real, but peace was not. The queen consort's silence did not feel like defeat. It felt like the beginning of a larger reckoning. Yet the keys were only the visible symbol, because the real power behind the decision sat deeper inside the machinery of monarchy. A royal order can look simple on paper: a signature, a date, a line of instruction. But this one carried the weight of betrayal, fear, and finality. Charles did not sign it quickly. He read it twice, removed his glasses, and stared at the desk as though the ink itself might accuse him. When the pen moved, Camilla's access ended. Charles knew the room had already chosen silence before he entered it. William stood near the edge of the desk, controlled but watchful, while a senior courtier waited with the file held close to his chest. The palace legal office, the private team that checks royal decisions against household rules and crown property control, had already made the position clear. Queen Mary's diamond vault belonged to the crown, meaning the monarchy as an official institution, not to one person as a permanent personal privilege. That mattered because Camilla's claim could no longer rest on feeling, loyalty, or years beside the king. It had to answer to authority. Charles lowered his eyes to the final page. The king saw Catherine's name written where Camilla's access had once stood, and the cost of that change moved across his face. He was not choosing between jewels. He was choosing between the woman who had walked beside him through scandal and the future queen who would help carry the monarchy after him. William understood the sadness in his father's stillness, but the prince did not step in. He did not ask for mercy. He had already seen what mercy, when misused, had allowed to grow. A senior courtier finally spoke, and his words landed with the cold force of record. He explained that Camilla's removal had been recommended after repeated concerns about interference with future queen's ceremonial planning. The phrase sounded polished, but everyone understood the meaning. Catherine's place had been blocked. Requests had been delayed. Historic jewels had become tools in a private struggle. The courtier did not reveal this through gossip. He cited a documented household review, a written internal account, created to track approvals, delays, and decisions inside the palace system. Charles turned one page back, as if hoping the earlier wording might soften the ending. It did not. The signed order included one final instruction that made the room colder. All physical and duplicate keys were to be returned through palace security, not through informal staff. Palace security, the official team responsible for protecting restricted royal spaces, mattered because its involvement removed any chance of quiet negotiation. Camilla would not hand the keys to a friendly aide. She would surrender them under procedure. William watched the pen move. Charles signed once, then set it down with a care that felt almost painful. The king had protected the monarchy, but he had wounded Camilla to do it. And once security became part of the order, the decision stopped being symbolic. And the first person to feel that new reality was Camilla, who discovered that palace doors can close without raising their voice. The next morning was quiet in the way palaces become quiet before humiliation. Camilla walked the familiar corridor expecting routine, expecting deference, expecting the old rules to remain hidden beneath new language. But when she reached the secure antechamber, the guard did not step aside. He lowered his eyes, gave a careful bow, and told her the access had changed. The key in her hand no longer mattered. Camilla stared at him as though she had misheard. The secure antechamber, the guarded room before the vault itself, mattered because it was the final barrier between private royal authority and the jewels only trusted hands could reach. Palace security had already updated the access protocols, meaning the official rules that decide who may enter restricted spaces. The transfer to Catherine was not ceremonial anymore. It had become operational. It had become daily life. And daily life had just stopped the queen consort at a door she once expected to pass. Camilla did not argue at first. She simply looked down at the key in her hand, the small object that had once carried the comfort of permission. The guard kept his voice low, but procedure made his words colder than anger ever could. He was not choosing Catherine over her. He was not challenging her rank. He was only following the new order. That was what made the humiliation so sharp. Camilla had not been confronted by a rival. She had been corrected by a system that no longer recognized her authority. A staff member nearby saw her fingers close around the useless key. The aide did not move, because movement would have made the moment worse. Camilla's face held steady, but the stillness looked painful. She turned away without speaking, and that silence carried more weight than any outburst could have. The queen consort had entered that corridor believing some parts of palace life would still bend for her. She left knowing the door had already chosen someone else. Catherine, elsewhere inside the palace, received the updated access file with none of the triumph others expected from her. The file explained who now held authority, who could request access, and who would approve movement connected to the vault. Catherine understood why it mattered. Queen Mary's diamond vault was not just a room of jewels. It was a protected symbol of royal memory, and every choice tied to it would now be read as a sign of her judgment. An official ledger was placed before her that same morning. The Vault Ledger, a record book listing historic pieces and their approved use, opened to a first page marked with Queen Mary's name in faded ink. Catherine rested her hand near the page but did not smile. The future queen had received the keys, but she had also received the burden behind them. And what began as Camilla's loss now became Catherine's test, because possession of the keys demanded something harder than victory. It demanded mercy. That choice would come not in a council room, but in a private meeting, where two women finally spoke, without the palace standing between them. Power often announces itself loudly, but Catherine's turning point came softly. No aides, no courtiers, no prepared statement, just Catherine and Camilla in a private sitting room, with the surrendered keys resting between them like a small silver verdict. Camilla expected victory to look cruel. Instead, Catherine offered something harder to accept: dignity without surrendering control. Catherine had requested the meeting herself, and that choice mattered more than anyone outside the room could understand. The vault was now under her full operational control, meaning she held the active authority to approve access, review historic pieces, and decide how the jewels would be used for royal duty. Camilla knew that before she entered. The queen consort also knew that no aide had been invited to soften the moment. No courtier had been placed between them, and no palace language would rescue either woman from the truth. Camilla came in guarded, wounded, and ready for insult. She expected Catherine to look pleased. She expected the future queen to carry victory like a blade. Instead, Catherine looked tired, not triumphant, and that unsettled her more than cruelty would have. The surrendered keys sat between them, and for a long moment neither woman touched them. The silence did what shouting could not. It forced Camilla to face the difference between being defeated and being replaced. Catherine spoke first, and her voice did not shake. She acknowledged that the decision had caused pain, but she refused to apologize for accepting a responsibility she believed belonged to the future crown. The future crown, in plain terms, meant the next stage of monarchy that William and Catherine would one day carry forward. That mattered because the vault was no longer just about who had access today. It was about who would protect the symbols tomorrow, when Charles was no longer the final shield between past and future. Camilla listened with a stillness that looked almost brittle. The queen consort wanted anger, because anger would have given her something to fight. Catherine gave her structure instead. She offered continued ceremonial consultation on select historic pieces, meaning Camilla could be asked for advice when certain jewels carried personal or family meaning. But Catherine made the boundary clear. No possession, no independent access, no veto power. The keys would not return to Camilla's hand. Catherine's offer revealed the full shape of the new order. Mercy would exist, but control would not be shared. Respect would remain, but interference would end. Camilla finally understood that this was not weakness. The future queen was not trying to humiliate her. She was defining power with grace and steel at the same time. Camilla rose without protest. She looked once at the keys, then at Catherine, and the fight seemed to drain from the room. The queen consort had not forgiven the decision, but by leaving quietly, she gave the palace what it needed most: a visible end to the internal war. But inside the palace, private surrender was not enough. Because outside the gates, the world had already turned the keys into a national symbol. By dawn, the private wound had become public theater. The image was everywhere: Catherine as keeper of Queen Mary's diamonds, Camilla as the woman ordered to surrender the keys. The palace wanted control, but the world wanted meaning. Outside Buckingham Palace, a crowd gathered beneath gray skies, staring at the gates as though the monarchy itself had just changed shape overnight. Catherine's name moved across every broadcast before the palace had finished managing its own response. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's official London residence and a main symbol of royal authority, became the center of attention because the decision had moved from private rooms into public judgment. Broadcasters framed the vault transfer as a generational shift, and that mattered because Catherine was no longer being discussed only as a beloved princess. She was being presented as a visible guardian of royal continuity, the person trusted to protect what the monarchy wanted to carry forward. William watched the coverage with a tension he could not hide. The prince understood public praise can become another kind of pressure, and Catherine's name now carried a weight that no headline could fully explain. She had gained authority, yes, but also scrutiny. Every jewel she approved, every ceremony she entered, every quiet choice tied to Queen Mary's collection, would now be studied for signs of what kind of future queen she would become. William knew Catherine had accepted the keys with grace, but he feared the world might mistake burden for triumph. Camilla watched alone, her face still as the first newspaper images appeared. The queen consort had survived years of judgment, but this felt different because the story was clean, sharp, and impossible to soften. One front page showed a large photograph of Buckingham Palace gates with the headline, "The keys passed to Catherine." The words reduced years beside Charles into one public surrender. Camilla did not speak. She only folded the paper once, slowly, as if closing it could silence what the country had already decided. A broadcaster outside the palace turned the moment into a national verdict. The reporter described Catherine as the keeper of royal memory, a phrase that spread quickly because it gave the transfer emotional meaning. In the crowd, a woman held a small paper crown and told the camera, "It feels like the future just arrived." That sentence mattered, because it showed how fast public feeling had settled. People were not only watching a family dispute, they were reading the decision as a sign that the monarchy had chosen its next moral center. Charles heard the phrase repeated later and said nothing. The king understood public opinion had moved faster than palace strategy. He had signed the order to protect the institution, but now the institution was being praised for moving away from Camilla and toward Catherine. The difference was painful. It made his decision look clean from the outside, while inside the family, it had cut deeply. And by the end of that day, the palace recognized the truth it could no longer control. Camilla's authority over the vault was gone, Catherine's place had been publicly sealed, and the emotional verdict had already moved beyond the queen consort's reach. Now all that remained was the final meaning of the decision, and whether the monarchy had punished one woman or protected something larger than them all. In the end, the vault was never only about diamonds. It was about who the monarchy trusted to carry memory without turning it into possession. Camilla lost access, but Catherine gained more than keys. She inherited a burden made of history, expectation, and judgment. The palace had spoken. The family had absorbed the shock, and the crown had chosen its future. Catherine understood the meaning before anyone had to explain it again. Queen Mary's Diamond Vault, the secured royal collection tied to historic jewels and private royal authority, had become the symbol of a generational transfer. That mattered because the monarchy does not survive on beauty alone. It survives on trust. It survives when the right person is believed capable of holding the past without bending it toward personal power. Catherine had not been handed decoration. She had been handed proof. Camilla's surrender was painful, but it was final. The queen consort had believed closeness to Charles would protect her from this kind of removal. And for a long time, that belief had carried her through every cold room and every public judgment. But influence has limits when trust is withdrawn. Camilla had not lost only access to a locked space. She had lost the assumption that her voice could still shape every symbol near the crown. For her, the keys represented acceptance. Losing them meant the palace had drawn a boundary she could no longer cross. Charles accepted that boundary with a sadness he could not hide. The king knew his signature had wounded the woman beside him, but he also knew hesitation would have wounded the institution he was born to protect. The crown, in plain terms, means the monarchy as a continuing duty beyond one person's feelings. Charles had spent his life preparing to serve that duty, and in this moment, service demanded a personal cost. He chose stability. He chose the future. He chose the order that would outlive the pain. William saw the decision for what it truly was. The prince understood Catherine's elevation was also a warning. The future crown would no longer tolerate private interference dressed as tradition. It would not allow historic jewels to become tools of rivalry. It would not let quiet delays and hidden pressure decide who deserved visibility. William had watched Catherine suffer through silence, and now he watched her accept authority without revenge. That was the difference. That was why the palace trusted her. Catherine placed the keys inside a secure case and paused over Queen Mary's ledger. The ledger, a formal record of jewels and their approved use, mattered because it turned beauty into responsibility. Catherine did not smile as she looked at the faded name on the page. She understood that power now required discipline, not celebration. She had won nothing simple. She had inherited a burden that would test her fairness, her restraint, and her strength. The verdict was clear. Camilla's chapter of control had closed. Catherine's stewardship had begun. Charles had paid the emotional price. William had seen the future take shape, and the monarchy had chosen the person it believed could protect its memory without turning it into a weapon. There is no unresolved ending here. The keys changed hands, the palace chose its guardian, and the monarchy declared that its future would be protected by Catherine's quiet strength rather than Camilla's fading command. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.